Welcome to our continuing series, Questions and Answers, from the works of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Today, the Force and the Divine Force, Part 3, from Sri Aurobindo. There is only one force or energy here in reality. What is called the individual energy does not belong to the individual, but to the one universal power. In the one infinite energy itself, a distinction has to be made between the divine force that descends from above the mind and the inferior universal energy with all its different forms, movements, waves, and currents that come into you from outside. The inferior energy proceeds from the divine Shakti, but it has fallen from the truth of its source and has no longer its direct guidance. When these universal energies come into touch with the divine force, rise to meet it, and allow it to take hold of them and occupy and change them, then they are purified and uplifted and transformed and become a movement of the divine force. When they are not in touch with the divine force, not obedient to it, but act for themselves, they are unenlightened, erring, impure, mixed, and confused, powers of the ignorance. Always, therefore, keep in touch with the divine force. The best thing for you is to do that simply and allow it to do its own work. Wherever necessary, it will take hold of the inferior energies and purify them. At other times, it will empty you of them and fill you with itself. But if you let your mind take the lead and discuss and decide what is to be done, you will lose touch with the divine force, and the lower energies will begin to act for themselves, and all go into confusion and a wrong movement. It is still worse to try to draw these lower universal energies from those around you and keep up with them a vital interchange. What gain can there be in that? On the contrary, it will lead to greater confusion and even bring in all kinds of mischief and trouble. Often, the association of these universal energies with others is a mistake of your mind. Your mind is seeking always to fix them on to somebody, and often it fixes on one or another at random, or else according to old experiences which are no longer valid. For instance, what you call X's force was not his, but a universal hostile force which used X at one time and, owing to a continued association in your mind, still presents itself to you as his, but may now no longer have anything to do with him. By keeping up the old association, you simply give greater opportunity for this undesirable energy to come upon you. Follow always the one rule: to open yourself directly to the divine force and not to others. If you keep in touch with it, all else will progressively arrange itself. From the Mother. Speaking of recent events, you asked me, quotes, whether it was a dangerous bluff or whether we narrowly escaped disaster. To assume both at the same time would be nearer to the truth. Hitler was certainly bluffing, if that is what you call shouting and making threats, with the intention of intimidating those to whom one is talking, and obtaining as much as one can. Tactics and diplomacy were used. But on the other hand, behind every human will, there are forces at work whose origin is not human and which move consciously towards certain ends. The play of these forces is very complex and generally eludes the human consciousness. But for ease of explanation and understanding, they may be divided into two main opposing tendencies: those that work for the fulfillment of the divine work upon earth, and those that are opposed to this fulfillment. The former have few conscious instruments at their disposal. It is true that in this matter, quality compensates by far for quantity. As for the anti-divine forces, they have only too many to choose from, and always they find wills which they enslave and individuals whom they turn into docile but nearly always unconscious puppets. Hitler is a choice instrument for these anti-divine forces, which want violence, upheaval, and war, for they know that these things retard and hamper the action of the divine forces. That is why disaster was very close. Even though no human government consciously wanted it. But at any cost, there was to be no war, and that is why war has been avoided for the time being.